Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today in celebration of World Environment Day. I am Marion Atieno Osieyo, and I am the host of Black Earth Podcast. And today, in collaboration with Derval Barzey of Climate Conscious Podcast, we have come together to celebrate pioneering change makers from around the world who are paving the way for land reconciliation and land transformation. But before we begin the webinar, we wanted to know where all of you are joining us from because we have a very global audience and community. So Derval is going to, put together a poll. And if you can just fill in the poll showing where you're joining us from, that would be amazing. Okay, Europe, Caribbean, North America. Amazing. Okay, brilliant. Today is an amazing day. As you know, World Environment Day is an annual celebration where all of us around the world come together to celebrate our common home, this beautiful place we call Earth, as members of the human species, but also as members of the Earth's beautiful ecosystem. But today is also a moment that is very bittersweet because all around the world, there are many people who are fighting for their lands. They're fighting for the right to live and the right to belong to our common home. We know of the ongoing conflicts that are, really publicized from Palestine to Sudan to the communities in the Niger Delta and the countless environmental human rights defenders all around the world who are really suffering unimaginable scale of violence, all in the name of property, all in the name of development and this so-called growth, this elusive definition of growth that stands in opposition to what we know to be true about our planet and what we belong to. And it's important to remember that whilst people are being killed, whilst species are being killed in the name of land, of development, it is really about a culture of domination, of violence, of colonialism, which all of our panelists here through territory and heritage have had links and experiences of that culture of domination and violence. And as the rising generation of earth keepers, we must remember that land is not property, land is not object. The truth is that land is living, land is sacred, land is our common home, land is memory, and land is kin. We start this a moment of silence to remember all of the people around the world, known and unknown, all of the species around the world, known and unknown, that are fighting for the right to live and fighting for the right to belong to their communities and to belong to the land. Thank you. So let us begin our celebration. First up, we have Milka Chepkorir. Milka is the Policy and Advocacy Coordinator for Africa at the ICCA Consortium. So Milka, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Again, happy World Environment Day, and joining you from my ancestral home, a home where we belong to the land and we belong to our forests, and we take pride in taking care of our land and our water and our trees. it's a day to celebrate and to really say that you can't talk about environment without talking about the land and the soil on which these all environment things are, are anchored on, and ourselves really anchored on. And from the perspective of Indigenous people, what we really know is that we really belong to the land. It's not the land belonging to us. And if anything, then we have a mutual recognition between ourselves and the land. And we know the land is taking care of us as we take care of it. And with the current lots of things happening, it's clear that if we don't take care of the land, then it doesn't take care of us. Anyway, I work with the ICCA consortium. It's a movement, an association of Indigenous people and local community conserved areas. So it's about the Indigenous people and local communities taking care of their own lands and the lands taking care of them. And that is why we call them territories of life. They are the territories from which we get life from and we give life to, that none of us exists without the other. And so the vision is really to make sure that the current development narrative and the current conservation narrative that separates people from whatever nature is nothing really, because it's a territory of life, because life from both ends depend on each other. And there's no way and no useful sense in separating who people are and who nature is. If anything, we are number one part of nature, just that we are the part of nature that has, we think that we have more brains than anything else in the globe, living. And being African, land and the people, be it in a sub-tribe, be it in a tribe, be it in a group of people, be it even in a country, let alone the fact that actually countries are things that were formed and boundaries put by the colonialism. But really, when you talk about territory, it has identity of people and their culture and their ways of life. And most importantly, their livelihoods that depend on these lands, and these lands depending on their sustainable livelihoods to thrive. Yeah. In the African setting, we know of many communities that are pastoral communities, being nomadic pastoralists, moving from one part of their territory to another. And that is the livelihood that they use to take care of their land and the land taking care of them, because then with the moving around, they are able to give the land some time to revitalize itself, to restore itself, and then they can come back to it when more grass is there, when there's more water to water the animals, and when there's more herbs for them to take, and that shows the pattern of Indigenous people in terms of restoring land. So again, when we talk about restoration, it's not about the restoration that normal conservationists will say. From an Indigenous people's perspective, restoration is really giving our land some time to heal after us having used it for some time. And then we move to another part within the same land to make sure that the land restores itself. And we also have the hunter-gatherers. I come from a hunter-gatherer community. We live in the forest, and our livelihood is from the fruits, from the honey, and from the other products that we have in the forest. Astonishingly and sadly, in time since the colonial conservation paradigm was adopted, is that it's been constantly criminalizing our ways of life and our being in the forest, and calling those places either biodiversity hotspots, or call them forest reserves, or call them protected areas. Of course, now people know about the protected area thing more than any other thing. And we ask ourselves, who do you protect this land from? Definitely there's someone that is coming to destroy, and the governments know, and the general systems of development know who is coming to destroy. And so the irony is, when they take the custodians, the people who belong to the land, and the land belongs to them, out of these lands, and say that that is the way to conserve, instead of looking at what we have been doing on our land that has sustained our being on the land and has sustained the land being there for us, and producing what then sustains our lives as hunter-gatherers. We have many other communities, even fishing communities, for example, living around the lakes and the oceans. And from nowhere, there's just so much focus on the resources on these lands, just for a few people to want to benefit from, and especially from those who turn the gears of what development is, just seeing that as something more important to them and to the world. I don't know who the world is, and of less benefit to the people who have really been taking care of these resources and been using them sustainably over time. And that's why you find that there's, evictions for all these communities, either pastoral, either fishing communities or hunter-gatherers from our territories in the name of conservation, or now even say, you don't know how to take care of this land has been degraded, these oceans have been degraded, or we want to restore them. I think the question that people should be asking themselves first is to say, how did we get here? How did we get these lands needing restoration in the first place? Because many of our territories, especially for us hunter-gatherers, don't really need restoration, because we have been there to protect and to take care of our land and to make sure that not many of the, or even none at all, of the outside force in the name of conservation come to our land to want to destroy our land. And we believe that our being on our land is a threat to those who want to come and destroy. And by destruction here, we mean people who want to come do mining, people who want to come and do timber logging, and people who want to source water unsustainably from these territories. Because if it was just for the use of ourselves as a community, then many other communities would have benefited without it really being extracted by one company or two or three that are controlled by a few people, and deny the people's, the people of the land and their own resources. Of course, it is sad, especially to see that in the African continent, many of these occasions and many of these evictions and unsustainable extraction of resources is going on every day with brutality, like the militarization that comes with mining and militarization that comes with conservation, the conservation paradigm that is colonial. And, the brutality that is coming through groups within communities being formed against the groups that are the existing governance systems of communities. Really sad to see that is the case. And so it leaves us with asking ourselves, who is pushing, who is coming with the negative force here? And it's clear that it is the developmentalists. It is the fortress conservationists who don't really see our value in it. It is most of the time the non-Indigenous people that don't see our value and our cultural attachment to our land being what is taking care of these territories of life, either as Indigenous people or as local communities, but more particularly, especially on Indigenous people. And so a question was put to me, and it has been put to me many times, to say then, how can we non-Indigenous people be good friends of Indigenous people then, or how can we support Indigenous people to really restore or conserve, of course, in the places that have been destroyed before, conserve better? And the question is, the answer is clear. Come to us, not with your predetermined method of conservation, not with your own thinking of what conservation is. You come to our territories because they are better conserved than where you come from as a conservation specialist or as a conservation, whatever, you come to our lands because our lands are better conserved. How about you learn from us? Or make sure you can understand what we have been doing on these lands to keep these lands this good, That is why you see them good, either in the Congo Basin as a very beautiful land, because people have been doing something. Come and learn what we are doing, and then ask us how you can better support what we have been doing as Indigenous people on our territories to take care of our territory, not bringing outside perspectives and paradigms that will then disorient our cultural ways of life, or come in with an intention to create different groups that then would fight, and then you claim to say, oh, these people are not even working together. I think that is the practice, the evil practice that many conservation organizations, especially the big ones, have used against communities. Just think that communities don't know anything, and so you just go into them and want to bring ideas from outside to say this is how to conserve this. Let's appreciate the fact that we go to territories of life because they are better conserved first. And so it only makes sense if we understand what these communities have been doing to take care of their land and support that which is related to their self-determination, their mutual recognition, and their guardianship of their land, rather than seeing them as people that do not know what they are doing, and therefore advising governments to evict people from their territories. It is unfair, it is unjust, and on an international day like this, we really have to appreciate what communities have done in their own Indigenous ways to take care of whatever people call nature is, for themselves and for the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Milka. Thank you for your reflections. We really appreciate it. I'll hand over next to Dr. Gaius Eudoxie, who is a soil advocate and soil scientist and professor at the University of West Indies. Thank you, Dr. Eudoxie.
Thank you so very much, Chair. Let me extend my compliments to both you, Marion from Black Earth, and as well Derval from the Conscious Climate podcast. Thank you so very much for giving me the opportunity to share with our audience some insight into the reconstruction, really, of our land. And it's indeed an honor following from Milka, who provided a perspective that was truly enriching. And I hope that I could probably add a little bit of context scientifically to show how, we have to understand that our land is not separate from the people who utilize that resource as well. And I would probably start by, let me share my screen and move right into where I would like to take our audience. And I particularly looked at I thought about the theme of World Environment Day that speaks to land. And one of the things I wanted to pay attention to, and I think Milka brought it very easily, is that connection that land has to nearly everything else within our environment. And one of the things I wanted to share specifically is what that connection means from a very scientific perspective. And my title, From Dirt to Soil, is very purposing in that, it has a lot to do with our consciousness as well, as to how we perceive and hence interact with this particular resource. So very quickly, I want us to, 4 things I want to touch on. Interaction of soil, particularly when we deconstruct our land and what that means, and how soil forms a pivotal kind of central resource related to the others that are part of land, and what we have done globally, in terms of trying to recognize the importance of that resource and try to position us as to where we need to go. So if you pay attention very closely, there's been a lot of focus now on soil as one of the components of our land. And when we think about it very critically, we realize that it is central to everything we do. So it is the one that connects our atmosphere, our biosphere, which really actually has to do with our biodiversity, particularly above ground. It is the one that connects with our hydrosphere, our water, and as well those very same minerals and things that we require from our resource below ground. So it is central to what we do. And it is that recognition that really is missing. What do you think about how governments are trying to address some of those key issues that we have in our previous engagements, particularly when you think about new conventions? So was not a part of that conversation. Land was probably part of that conversation, if some of our audience can remember. The change was very broad about that. Biodiversity was very big there, and it took the African nations to try the importance of land. But when we go further, we have to also recognize that it's not just the land, it is what the land is comprised of, and our recognition of it. Globally, we recognize water, globally, we recognize air, particularly as we speak to now increasing concentrations of carbon dioxide. Globally, we recognize biodiversity, particularly both and biodiversity, but we have not recognized importance of resource, which is soil, and how soil relates to number of services it provides us as humans. And as I said, I'm so happy to be following further in helping ourselves surrounding its importance to livelihoods. So here we're just seeing its connection to our SDGs, and there's not one single SDG that soil either not directly or indirectly contributes to our ability to attain. So in essence, if we do not see it as pivotal and central, we would fail in our attempts, even globally, to try to get systems that are sustainable. And if you realize that our purpose in the actual graphic is that obviously carbon storage and greenhouse gas regulation is central to those services that it provides. And we understand, obviously, from a very technical perspective, the significance of that from a number of different impacts that our mismanagement of that simple system service has created. I will not go into a number of developmental themes, and they probably what they would have created. But I'm trying my best to stick particularly to, where science has brought us and how we can use science to support what needs to be done. Currently facing us, we have a number of world challenges. Yeah, you see 8 of them identified here. Most of them, obviously, I should say all of them, are interaction between humans and the environment. And it is obviously our mismanagement that has led to all of those particular challenges that we face. But nonetheless, it still requires us to recognize that there is a role for us to play in managing that. And I position here a very key concept into that, how soils are intricate to our ability to attend to and manage those global challenges that we are seeing on the slide. And it really has to do centrally with the concept of soil health. And soil health really speaks to the ability to sustain productivity, use, and functionality of our soils in the terrestrial systems that we have. And it's important for us to understand that, because that is entrenched in how we, as humans, manage that resource. And if we are not aware and we are not conscious of that, as we have seen in the past, the continuation of those challenges and exaggeration of those challenges will continue. I can speak specifically to our situations, particularly in Caribbean. We have seen very recently, over the last couple of months, a very intense set of heat waves. And certainly we have recorded some of the highest temperatures in our history of recording temperatures through this last few months that passed. And these are clear signs that there is a need for us to understand how we, as humans, interact with our environment, and particularly recognizing that our land and its deconstruction and disaggregation into these resources are needed. People got in there as well, right? And I think I want to again recognize the is that we have huge land as a concept. We have to learn a lot from its administrative perspectives and not necessarily from its resource perspective. And hence that's why we connect land use so much to how our lands are managed, rather than seeing the land and its resources as resources for conservation and resources that need to be appropriately and sustainably managed. We have tried very hard to do that because of the focus that have been paid on resources like water, and now a lot of this attention is being focused on it. But the same is not necessarily so for soil. So just to give our audience a better insight into the relationship of soil to some of the global threats and global challenges we face, soil is highly associated with climate change and our ability to mitigate and to adapt to climate change. That has been recognized now by the UNFCCC and some of the recent publications from the ICCA and IPPS. We recognize that our ability to manage soils is central and pivotal in our ability to address and control climate change, particularly when it comes to mitigation and adaptation. The soils really is the second largest repository for carbon dioxide that we have, and how we manage it is how well it serves as a repository. I'll also touch on soil and water. Very critical, and I've just recently the Global Soil Partnership, I think last year had a symposium on soil and water. And it's very important for us to understand how these two interact. Because a lot of infrastructure, a lot of work is being done on water, particularly when it comes to integrated water resource management, when it comes to water treatment, when it comes to aspects of water management, but it's not paying attention to the fact that you cannot manage water if you don't manage the soil. And these are the dysfunctioning elements that need to be combined. If we are thinking about appropriate land management, sustainable land management, we're thinking about principles of degradation neutrality. These are two concepts that must be applicated if we are to successfully cross that hurdle. Our soils now. Our soils currently globally are under threat. Almost 33% of global soils are degraded across the Caribbean. Through various types of assessments, we have seen most of our countries at the point where our lands are degraded, some over 50%. And there is a need for us to recognize that a key part of that degradation is erosion. And erosion means really and truly our soils are being lost, and obviously their health is being compromised, and hence their ability to service and provide those ecosystem services and functions, including productivity, is being compromised. And hence there is a need for us to focus and understand that we need to put things in place and not efforts, certainly national level, in terms of how we address those key threats that are facing our soils. I would just probably try to identify a few frameworks and mechanisms where we have recognized and we need to move at different scales, and what's currently being done to try to address that. So at the largest scale we have, global scale, there are two actors, that have been driving the advocacy surrounding soil. I must recognize Global Soil Partnership actually having their plenary assembly. The third one is today, and it's going on right now, where all members, country members are now discussing what is going to happen and what the frameworks that they are going to adopt going forward. So they have developed that framework that you see here as an opportunity for us to see soil health as a solution to addressing the soil threats against the global challenges. And they have provided this framework where they work regionally as well as nationally to ensure that countries can adopt some of those critical opportunities to address what we call sustainable soil management and sustainable land management. I also want to highlight the Focus 1000 initiative, and in Save Soil, I also want to highlight Save Soil and Conscious Planet campaigns as well. All of them are global campaigns that seek to recognize the importance of carbon and carbon in our soil. And by far, it is the number one property that has the potential to provide us global returns, once we invest appropriately in it. And what we are seeing, certainly, when you think about Indigenous and how lands have been managed, it always reflects increases and conservation of carbon in soils. And that's why we have certainly a lot to learn from our local and Indigenous persons in terms of how they will go about managing land. Not necessarily even thinking about restoration, because most times the lands that we manage don't require restoration. So we have to think about some of these strategies. But when you think about some of the current strategies that are being implemented, a lot of it is and traditional knowledge and practices that will be used. Well, these are genuine and important initiatives to drive us to the direction, in terms of improving our overall soil health and minimizing our degradation and threats. Regionally, I want to speak to this wonderful project in Caribbean, of course, that is being executed by the Partnership Initiative for Sustainable Land Management, and being implemented by the Food and Agricultural Organization of the UN. And this particular project is one that is now positioned in our Caribbean countries to recognize the importance of soil. It is one of the first projects that have been touched with attending to the important issue of soil as a component of land, probably within the last 60 to 70 years. And it is positioning us now to get a better understanding in terms of having sufficient soil data, in having sufficient networking, collaboration, and having sufficient mainstreaming and harmonization in terms of our policy instruments that are addressing how we manage soil as a resource. And one of the things I want to say just before again is that we need to see soil and view soil as a global resource that belongs to the planet and its inhabitants. And once we transcend that to land, then it gets this legal context and it becomes now something that individuals or entities could own. And there's where it becomes complicated. And I think both Marion and Milka touched on that. So we have to view the resource for what it is, which is a global resource that belongs to all living organisms on our planet. And how we manage it has to be in such a manner that it is conserved so that everyone could benefit from that key and critical resource. So I want to leave by just saying that when it comes to the approach we want to take, we do recognize that advocacy, promotion, education surrounding soil is very critical, because one of the things we have to realize that most persons don't understand it, and that's why I started with that title. Most persons see soil as dead, not necessarily as a living entity that supports the multitude of ecosystem services that we require, particularly as macroorganisms, to survive on this earth. So we really need to have that change, and that perception change, such that the little things we do eventually is going to improve our soil health and allow for us to reach our sustainable goals. Thank you so very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eudoxie. Thank you for your presentation. Up next, we have Sarah Queblatin. Sarah is the founder of the Green Releaf Initiative, and she's also an inclusive regenerative design specialist. Sarah, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Marion, and thank you, Derval, and the panelists and everyone joining here. I just want to say I feel so grateful to be adopted by the beautiful Black community who has been wonderfully eloquent about their work and their passion and their cause. I'm coming from the Philippines. I'm actually currently in France. I'm visiting my sister, but I'm a Filipina. And so my story has to do with our work in climate vulnerable contexts, but a trauma-informed approach to it. So if I could share my screen, I could share a little bit about our experience. If some of you are familiar, or maybe not, the Philippines is one of the most climate vulnerable nations. We just had a volcanic eruption too, so we have a lot of other hazards and disasters. For many years, in a way, it's kind of our obligation, as much as we try not to, but it is part of our way of life to deal with this so-called vulnerability. As I've working with communities in the front lines of climate and also conflict, we also have worked around displacement in terms of conflict. What I saw is that most of the aid system has been responding in a fragmented way. And how can we address a broken system if, after a loss or damage or displacement or disasters, there's how can we heal and change the narrative in a whole way, not from a broken approach, not from a fragmented approach. And so in this journey, I worked, in different levels. I go to the climate COPs, I work with government leaders, I also engage with, international organizations and platforms, but I'm also working with the grassroots leaders and local stakeholders. I'm a permaculture designer and an ecosystem restoration, educator. But in this work, I love that we're talking about land and soil and how that identity is held by the land, and how, when Milka was talking about restoration, now what is the true meaning of restoration, and now we're brought back also to the spirit of soil by it's very hard to pronounce your name, but the previous speaker, still learning to pronounce everyone's names, but I really appreciate the benefits of of working with the lands in terms of the ecological benefits, the health benefits, but also for us, there's a lot of ways of working with restoring. So we'll talk about that later, as how we work with land and identity and belonging, and as a way to use a trauma-informed approach to regeneration. So I'll give a short overview about my work. So that you know that with communities after conflict, after the natural disasters, even the COVID-19 pandemic, we work with farmers, indigenous peoples, we work with community leaders, government leaders. So we are diverse. We work with everybody as much as we can. But our work, because it's in the emergency management part, we try to use a more regenerative lens to it. And so we're looking at working with the ecosystem as a way to work with resilience and regeneration. As normally we hear disaster risk reduction, but how can we change the DRR as disaster risk reduction into designing for resilience and regeneration? So we are working in 3 levels. We're currently scaling what we started on 3 levels, from preparedness and response using a platform for mutual aid. Response and recovery has how we're working with gardens, permaculture gardens in camps and resettlements. We're addressing food security there. And then lastly is to prevent, so to mitigate further emergency by training people ahead and deep scaling the initiatives of people already doing the work. So this is our platform in an emergency. A big part of it is food, layering the food and community kitchens and farms so they can link together ahead of an emergency and people can collaborate locally, localized aid. We were in beta and we're hoping to scale this more this year. And And then we also do our training. We're preparing for a long-term training site because instead of working in the landscape, setting up an emergency relief and going to the raising as much money and build up as a learning site in the demo sites that we've done in camps and resettlements, we are now venturing into a long-term training center where people can be trained ahead because we foresee so many disasters to come in my part of the world. So we want to prepare as many. And we have worked with grassroots leaders more because they are the first responders and that we know, and often they are the ones who can actually help the early adopters we work with. And these are some of them. And we try to certify them also so that they can also be recognized by their local governments or their, partner communities. The way we're scaling initiatives, because we believe that everybody's already doing the work. We don't need to build something new, but rather how do we weave them together and to root up to scale wide, but also to scale deep, deepening the relationships of collaboration. And we're using the restoration aims so that people can, scale their efforts for long-term food, resilient ecosystems through native trees. And so we're working with various stakeholders from ridge to reef to enhance their collaboration and impact. The impact is not really the best word to use, but they're the way they are transforming themselves and their communities. So the question about how might we design from a trauma-informed way, we're looking at three levels. For us, at least my background is mental health and psychosocial support. So I work with the journey between survivors to thriver. And as an artist, I also use some creative handles, and I've seen some mirrors of how people navigate their trauma personally, but also in the collective way. So like for working with the illusion, like something is, used to be safe and no longer safe. Something used to be a place of home, but cannot live there anymore. So that's the kind of the metaphor of the change of reality with illusion, and the journey from survivor is like some of the ways we bring that is to really understand and go through the grief with the community. So we like working with art-based approaches, ritual, and also like this. I love this chapel flew away after Typhoon Haiyan, and all these grandmothers were holding space for the dream of the community and prayer. And that's for me is like one of the ways to kind of nurture and journey with the community. And then some of them are saying that they're not ready yet to recover. So we only work with the early adopters who are ready so that by the time we leave, the early adopters are ready to share their knowledge, and they are locally leading after us. And then, so in this journey from survivor to thriver is this process of restoring. So we're restoring their sense of belonging, sense of self, sense of wholeness, their resilience, and so working with intuition, like recalling what you already know, what is the local wisdom of the place, what knowledge systems, what capacities do people already have. So for example, here we're mapping the capacities and skills that displaced people already have so that they can design a livelihood program, or what is already in your landscape. Like we're doing a hazard mapping, but we're also looking at what are the places of value or places of meaning and safe spaces in the landscape. So, and then here there's, before we grew a garden, we work with what are the things that people can be grateful for, or they can draw from their inner resilience. And then going back, as we change the narrative from restoring to restoring, is to move from survivor to thriver. And this time whenever we get asked, is the storm going to happen again? And that's not an easy question to answer, because we know it will get stronger. But what we would like to say and how training to help enable is that if it comes again, we hope that we have the system in place to respond better and recover faster or in a more meaningful way. So when we work with this, we work with our imagination. We design and plan together. We design the right way, plant the right communications. We enhance the collaborations for people to create new stories and new narratives in the landscape. And we have those scaling of initiatives that are already there. And I also want to add, we can't see it at the bottom, but our work with resilience and is helping restoring. Resilience is the capacity to spring back to your, normality or your original, the original capacity you have, or at least how you were before a traumatic event happens. Regeneration is where we need that capacity to be resilient. It brings us to this readiness to be able to create a new or to change the narrative, to create a better system, and to be a thriver. So those are kind of the handles we're working with in this journey. I don't know how much I could share more, but for now, that's hopefully that's bringing that spirit of restoration in the how we're restoring ourselves, our sense of belonging to place, and in our bodies and our traumas, and the collective healing that helps allow that. And as we restore the earth as well, and our ecosystems, our community, we're able to change the narrative and restore ourselves anew, hopefully, and be ready for what's to come in a better way. So thank you for listening, and happy to answer questions later. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you so much. That was really powerful. Our final presenter is Tamara Nicholson. Tamara is the Senior Director of Zonal Operations at the Forestry Department of Jamaica. Thank you so much, Tamara.
Thank you all very much for having me. I am grateful for this opportunity, as well as the panelists that have been here so far. I've learned so much, and I'm looking forward for us continuing this discussion, especially on such an impactful day. So my presentation, short enough, it is looking at how we view community and social forestry, but more so we're rooting it at the community level, which are mostly forest-dependent communities. And when you think of forestry, you don't normally see people. And this is why I want to center this discussion on land restoration and how we do so with a gendered approach, by way of looking at how men and women they interface with the environment, but more so how us as policymakers at the government level can work hand in hand together, but also hand in heart. When we think of centering the discussion, I want us to look at what we have in Jamaica known as our local forest management committee. And this is actually written in policy since 1996. And in doing so, we have communities that actually work in partnership with us. And what we try to do as best as possible is to include, or rather to have an inclusive approach, by way of making sure that women are part of the discussion. For some time to time, when I think of forestry, it's very male-dominated, male-centric, male-visible. So one of the things we do is, firstly, we make sure we have capacity training in leadership, governance, as well as proposal writing. That way, we're increasing women's participation in community-led forestry activities by way of having them to understand what projects they want to do, how it will impact them by knowing their strategic needs as well as their practical needs, building that sense of confidence by way of also knowing governance system. Because what we do in the forestry department is largely based on forest management plans, and we want to make sure at the end of the day there's a sense of transparency. We also ensure that our training, they're very gender sensitive. We are mindful of the time. So it's not that we're having training and the women are not being able to do their traditional roles, as well as such as mothers, and we're excluding them. We always ensure as best as possible that they are part of the conversation, and it's not just an add-on, they're seamlessly integrated in all of the activities that we do. But also what we try to do at the institutional level with these LFMCs to ensure that the executive bodies themselves have a balance. That way the representation is women and men. And I've included a picture at one of our chair who also participate in community mobilization at the schools in terms of telling them what is it that the groups do, how we can get persons to be involved. And this acts as a way of also ensuring at the end of the day, children are re-socialized, or there's a sense of a community that we're teaching and persons are nurtured, which again symbolizes what women do in terms of a function. When we look also in terms of a gender responsive method in terms of our forest management, for us in the forestry department, we worked heavily with contractors who are at the community level. And in doing so, we ensure as best as possible that men and women are part of the reforestation activities, whether they're planting, they're doing maintenance, weeding, creating fire lines. We have them as contractors, subcontractors. And at the end of the day, it's oftentimes women who might have the national IDs or the bank accounts for payment. So you see women are very integral because, again, at the literacy level at some of these communities, we don't always often find men having these markers of identification as well as banking information. So again, you see women are instrumental, and it's almost as if they have the power or they're being led to be embraced to say, you know, I can play a role in making sure my partner can do the work and I can help with collecting the money. I know how the money is being spent in the community. Another thing we do is by way of promoting women in reforestation activities, particularly for international days, such as International Day for Rural Women, where we highlight the role that women do by tree planting activities. And one that we did particularly last year was very, very, very powerful, where it was also Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And what we did, we used flagging tapes to tag trees that we planted for community women who might have died from breast cancer, but more so to have that sense of recognition that women, they're nurturers, they're giving life. And again, that attachment with breasts, you know, it's seen, there's a sense of visibility. But also, we also ensure that there's training at forest fire management trainings, and women, again, they're part of the theory as well as the practical. And again, it's essential that we see women participate in these activities, and it's not seen as a male field that is only the men in the community should be taking care of the fires when they happen, but women also are integrated in this process. When we look at also our sustainable alternative livelihood opportunities, one of our speakers, our first speaker, Milka, I hope I got the name correct, spoke about the land. And again, when you're thinking about cottage industries that can be created through agroforestry, you know, you're growing cash crops with timber, again, you're restoring the environment, but you're also creating a means or enhancing productivity of the land by way of creating agro-processed items. And this is just some of the items that some of the community groups would have created, as well as us promoting as an agency at our last National Forest Conference that was held. Again, as a government entity, we work with both the private and public sector, and we use this opportunity to promote what the groups are doing as a means of them having a market to be able to sell, as to earn, as well as to show that at the environment level, they can do sustainable agricultural practices with the agency. And finally, you know, I want to talk also other sustainable opportunities such as apiculture. And why we promote apiculture training is in particular to reduce the pressure on the forest from illegal logging as well as unsustainable subsistence farming. And what we try to ensure as best as possible is to look at how we can also do valid added products from honey. And one of the cheapest things you can actually get from bees is actually honey. And, you know, you could sell pollen, you could actually sell the queen bees, you know, but you're also restoring the environment with a lot of the logwoods, for example, that are grown. And particularly for the cockpit country, which is one of the protected areas that I work in, it's very necessary because without the trees that are grown in these areas, it will impact our water sources. And again, at the end of the day, we want to ensure that policies are driven with people hand in hand, and they're able to earn an income from doing so. And finally, I want us to look at greenhouse technology, you know, the need to bring some level of exposure to community members to two new technologies, as well as knowledge to aid in resocialization of farmers, where, you know, they tend to do a lot of traditional farming practices that are negative to the environment, to the soil, particularly as the second speaker would have spoken about. And what we try to do is to ensure that capacity training is free, and we partner with different agencies. So at the end of the day, youths are involved, women are involved, but also the community, the society, they are involved in the process. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. And thank you to all of our speakers. What a series of enlightening and inspiring presentations. I think each presentation brought out diverse perspectives on land conservation from across the Global South. And now I want to go on a Global South tour to get first-hand experience of these insights. But I have to thank our speakers for sharing their time and expertise with us. We're now going to jump right into a rapid fire Q&A, a very short Q&A session, just to get some discussion around some additional aspects of land restoration and as we explore the World Environment Day theme. So I'll invite all our panelists to come back on screen with us. With land restoration, there are the technical and the scientific aspects of it. Understanding the ecological processes and determining the most appropriate method for revitalizing degraded ecosystems. But land restoration intersects with many other social and socioeconomic issues. So when we speak about land restoration, we have to talk about community engagement, access to resources, social equity, gender equality, culture, and so many other topics. And I know Tamara touched a bit on it in terms of social forestry in Jamaica. So I want to start with you, Sarah. What approaches to inclusivity you have integrated in your work in land restoration?
Yeah, thanks, Derval. Well, primarily we do a lot of consultation at the start, especially we work with Indigenous communities and displaced communities. So they have also like a process of free, prior, and informed consent for Indigenous communities. We also often we are invited by organizations, but we also try to make sure that consultation still takes place if we are invited and there's already free, prior, and informed consent through the ones inviting. There's, apart from consultation, we also engage them in a participatory design process. So that participatory design involves a journey of listening and dialogue. If, like, for example, we're weaving collaborations across sectors, like we're the weaver with government, civil society, and business. We help facilitate this process of collective design, and then at the same time, this process of trust building, of deep scaling, is that we're also bringing in this a deeper connection to the self and nature, so inclusive of the personal journey, not just the inclusivity in terms of representation of where you're a minority or not, but also like bringing it to that level, and also that even in kinship, with nature, is nature also part of the design? So remembering our cultural heritage and ancestral wisdom is also part of that, including that in the design process. So.
Thank you, Sarah. I'd love to hear from you, Milka, in terms of integrating inclusivity in your work in land restoration.
So maybe first to say is that we work really at a community collective level at the ICCA consortium and also at my community level. But I will go to that very specific question from you when I talk about my community. But just to speak about what our approaches are at the ICCA consortium, is that to have everybody involved in the processes. Is we focus on supporting the collective ownership of land by communities, so that every member of the community identifies with the land, whether you're male, female, old, or young, identify with the land on which you have been living on and taking care of for years. We hate to support communities to do this because honestly, the communities belong to the land and the land belongs to them. But what to say, it is the systems that government have put in place that in order for you to really prove that you own a land, then you have to have a legal recognition of it in terms of a paper. So what we focus on is to support legal land, collective land ownership of these communities, and to support them to practice their self-determined priorities based on their own traditional livelihoods. And in that sense, then the inclusion part of it comes with what women do traditionally and what men traditionally would do to conserve and take care of their land and sustainably use the resources on these lands, and to ensure that all of them are really participating in passing on of the traditional knowledge to the younger generation. And that is now when it comes to the inclusiveness of the youths when it comes to community land struggles, because many of these issues have been talked about and people are like, where are the elders of this community? Where are the elders of this community? Because they are the ones who make decisions traditionally. And with time, it's been like youths are being left out and some of the women are being left out. And so when we talk about what the role of each of the groups within the communities in terms of passing on traditional and indigenous knowledge, then it brings all of them together. So that's one strategy. But in my own community, when it comes to restoration, is with time we have realized who destroys more, who conserves more. When you think about who is easily taken away by a bribe to cut a tree down or to misuse a resource, it would most of the time be the men of the community, especially the young ones. And so we look at what the females can do to influence that, to create that balance of taking care of the environment. And so the women in my community, who I am very proud of, are the ones now replacing those trees. And so the men will be ashamed to come back and want to misuse any other resource because it is a woman who planted it and in our culture, you don't touch what a woman has nurtured. It's like cutting off life because a woman gives life. And so when they plant a tree and they take care of a place, then it means it is sacred. And so it is respected as such. So that is a huge strategy that we used in our community and it's working here.
Wow, I think we definitely should adopt that over here in the region. I have to bring you into the conversation, Dr. Eudoxie, for your perspective on this.
Everybody's perspectives on it share. I think we follow very similar strategies where we speak to how we get people involved. I think the basis of it is participatory and inclusivity. For instance, a lot of projects that we work on, regional based product projects, have elements from the design phase where all stakeholders are given an opportunity to contribute to how we are going to, particularly when you have interventions that are going to have impacts on livelihoods. These stakeholders are given the opportunity to understand and to contribute to how that design element works. I think one of the things, particularly from our perspective, particularly as educators, we have to be very concerned and careful about, particularly is where we speak to persons that are going to engage in training or capacity development. And that is one of the areas where we have seen, and they consider it particularly, I don't think we have the dichotomy where it comes to women and men so much so in the Caribbean in terms of opportunities, probably in some of our indigenous and rural villages. But we do see that that difference occurred, particularly opportunities for youth. And, that is an area where I think we have seen in a lot of movement that we've been doing together with our partners, a stronger and more determined approach to ensuring that, they are considered within the framework of design as well as the execution of various activities, and particularly made sure that they are provided with the opportunity that generation to come, necessary skill sets and knowledge that is required for continuing process that we have started, which is so I think there have been considered approaches with regards to some of the developmental institutions for addressing those shortcomings to ensuring that some of our stakeholders that are not necessarily always involved given that opportunity to participate and to share their views as well.
Okay, thanks for that. I know we could sit here and discuss this topic at length, but as we are approaching the close of today's webinar, sadly, I want to pose this question to each of the panelists for a 1-minute rapid fire response. You know, we live in a world of multiple crises happening all at once: health, environmental, climate change, economic. And for some reason, each of you continue to be inspired to get up every day and do the work that you do, to share your knowledge, inform and educate the public, and to help drive change to protect and restore our environment. So my question to you is, what gives you hope that land restoration is possible in our generation? And I'll start with you, Tamara.
I think for me, working in the government system where we actually work with people, I feel and I see every day, based on the fact that we even had our 3 Million Trees initiative and we got communities involved, we got a lot of persons involved. I feel strongly to my heart that we're making an impact. Persons are understanding the negative impacts of climate change. And in order for us to actually improve our ecosystem, to ensure that the next generation coming forward will not have to suffer the impacts we've been having from hurricanes, floods, it has to start with us. We have to make it serious, and we have to say at a policy level that this is what we want. We're going to invest money. We're going to have programs that are going to be impactful to communities, and we're going to monitor as well as to ensure that people are always a part of the discussion and that they're the one driving the policy for us, rather than us from a government's perspective staying at the top and just saying, all right, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. It's going to have to be, like I say, people-centered, that is very inclusive because we understand the realities, but also ensuring from a government perspective that we are funding these activities. Because, like I said, I believe in impact, and that's what we're doing now. Thank you.
Tamara. Sarah, 30 seconds.
Oh, wow. Well, I would say from the metaphor of roots, we work with communities impacted by disaster. They really don't want to plant trees because they said the trees have damaged our homes, our lives, our livelihoods. We don't want to grow trees. But, when we were working with our understanding of growing trees is that we work with native trees, indigenous to the land, so that they can grow deeper roots, so they can withstand disasters and hazards. That lesson is about going deeper into our local wisdom as people are remembering back their ancestral knowledge, relationship with the land. And then the deeper the roots, it's also deepening the relationship with people, and that collaboration that takes place, the deeper relationships that take place, they're the ones that kind of help strengthen any efforts that would sustain any agendas, hopefully. Without that relationship, deep relationship to self, the community, and the land, that really meeting the needs of, in this generation might not be sustainable. So for me, there is hope in that. I think if we create more spaces for that remembering. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. Dr. Eudoxie, what gives you hope?
I think in the Caribbean, I can speak for specifically that in over the last 5 years, I think I have seen a concerted effort by our policymakers, by our people to strive through environment, I guess, degradation neutral kind of scenario. I have seen them work together, they come together. We have seen the 25 by 25. We have seen concerted regional projects. That means governments have to sign off on that. So for me, what gives me hope is that there is a sense of community, and that community is not only within individual countries, but a sense of community as a region. And I think the amount of effort that I have seen over the last 5 years attached to our environmental concerns and attempting to address degradation Is what gives me hope that even within our time frame, that we will do a significant amount of work that will seek to address, and probably arrest the current state, and hopefully give our generations to come a chance to further restore. Thank you.
Thank you. And Milka, we'll end with you. What gives you hope?
I find a lot of hope in being Indigenous and knowing that there are Indigenous people across the world whose knowledge we hold on dearly and that we are using to at least keep our lands away from needing restorations, at least most of it, and that we can use the same knowledge to restore the places that have been destroyed. And I really also find a lot of hope in, not in a good way, but in the many climate disasters that are happening, because it reminds us that we have Indigenous knowledge systems that we have to go back to take care of the land, and the land will take care of us. So in a bad, good way, that we will be reminded to go back to who we are as humans and to take care of the planet for it to take care of us, and seeing the resilience of Indigenous people and their recognition in the global agendas and the strategies to address climate change and to address every other aspect, including restoration, really gives me hope. And passing on the knowledge is the way to go.
Thank you so much. It has been my honor to facilitate this panel discussion. And I think I speak for everyone when I say that we have been edified. You have given us so much food for thought and shared these practical approaches to land conservation from across the global south. I truly believe that we possess the ability to solve our problems. We just need to collaborate more, access more resources, and get the work done. So I must thank our audience for joining us for our celebration of World Environment Day. We really do appreciate your support and your presence and your participation with us today. On behalf of the Black Earth Podcast and the Climate Conscious Podcast, I thank you all for joining us for this Earth Day celebration. Remember to subscribe and follow Black Earth and the Climate Conscious wherever you get your podcast, and look out for future events. So thank you, and do enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are. Goodbye.